Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining Heritage Talks Online. My name is Heather Darch, and I'm a project director for the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network. And I'm joined today by Glenn Patterson, whose voice you've been hearing if you're on Zoom. He's also one of QAHN's project directors. You may be wondering what is the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network, also known as QAHN. So I'm just going to take a few moments to tell you about who we are. QAHN is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to preserve and promote the history, heritage, and culture of Quebec, and in particular of Quebec's English-speaking communities spread right across the province. If you go to our website at QAHN.org, you will discover a wide range of activities and projects that we're involved in. All of our projects, including Heritage Talks Online, are successful in large part because of the generous support that we receive from our members. We couldn't do what we do without our membership support. You're welcome to become a member of QAHN, and membership is open to everyone, including community groups and cultural organizations. So please check our website for more information about us and our many projects. You can also keep up to date by going to the website, and you can see what we're doing and discover all the organizations that are out there across our network. Membership enables us to provide quality workshops, programs, and projects, including our publication called Quebec Heritage News. And this is filled with really well-researched articles and images about Quebec's history. So if you love to read good history about Quebec's past, hear stories about people, places, and events that you will rarely hear about in history textbooks, I encourage you to become a member. You'll receive your own copy and join our great dynamic network of people and organizations. I would like to thank the funders who help in part to make this series possible, including Canadian Heritage, the Secretariat for Relations with English-Speaking Quebecers, the Chalkers Foundation, the Zellers Family Foundation, and the Townshippers Foundation. The Heritage Talks online series has a super lineup of researchers, writers, and historians, and you can discover all the presentation dates and times of broadcast right here on our Heritage Talks Facebook page or by going to QAHN's website. And you can join the talks either through Facebook Live. You don't have to have a Facebook page. It's a public site. Or you can come to Zoom and join in the conversation at the end of the speaker's presentation. And all you have to do is click on the link that are in the posts on Facebook page and pre-register. We'll be taking questions at the end of the from the audience at the end of tonight. And until then, we're going to ask the Zoom people to keep their microphones on mute and your cameras turned off. But at the end of the presentation, we would love it if you turn your videos back on and we can create a community and ask our speaker questions and have comments and that sort of thing. If you're on Facebook, you can always type in your comments and Glenn can ask them to our speaker on your behalf. So our speaker tonight is Barry McCullough. And Barry is the executive director of the Morrin Centre. He's originally from the Fredericton, New Brunswick area. He has over a decade's experience working with linguistic communities in Canada, including with Francophone communities in Alberta. Barry has been with the Morrin Centre for over 10 years, and tonight his talk is called The Morrin Centre, Highlighting Historic Spaces to Create Dynamic Community Space. Hi, Barry, and welcome.
Hi, Heather. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me. It's great to be here and, well, eventually we'll see some people at the end of all of this. So as Heather mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Morrin Centre in Quebec City. And I guess it's been 13 years now that I've been there. And I've been executive director since 2012. And I'm going to talk to you a bit today about a short history of the building, just to let everybody know how we got where we are today with the Morrin Centre and the restoration projects, the several restoration projects that have that various entities have undertaken over the years. I arrived right, I would say between the last two restoration phases, if we call them, if we want to call them that, which was probably a good time to arrive because I heard the first interior phase was something else to live through, and I know the second one was hard enough. So I think my timing was pretty good. Um, Today's talk, it's not really a historical talk. I'm not a historian. I'm a guy who's been around the Morrin Centre for a long time, and seen a lot of the things that have gone on. So I just wanted to share some of our experiences with all of you today. So for those of you who are familiar with the Morrin Centre, this is what it looks like. Um, Quite timely given the snow out front. Um, that's what it looks like, and you probably know this, the prison, and you probably know this, the library. So as I said, we'll talk about how we got to this point today. I did mention it wasn't a historic talk. We did in 2014. We commissioned 3 authors to produce a work uh, on the history of the building and its institutions, and that's called Iron Bars and Bookshelves. It was published by Septentrion in French, and then by Baraka Books in English. And that's still in print. You can get it at the Morrin Centre website. It's broken up into 3 sections: the prison, the college, and the Literary and Historical Society of Quebec. So it Today, though, what I'd like to talk to everyone about is the potential of historic spaces for creating dynamic community environments. The question is, what was there first? So the Morrin Centre, as it's known today, wasn't the first building on the site. The first was the Royal Redoubt, La Redoute Royale, which was finished around 1712 by the French. And was there until 1808. It was once part of the city's fortifications. It served also as military barracks, housed prisoners at various times, including after the British took control of the city in 1759 until about 1787. It was probably the city's main prison. And then, as I mentioned, eventually demolished in 1808 to make way for the Quebec Common Jail. This photo, watercolor, painted by James Coburn, is the best known representation of the building during the prison era. You can see the grate out front, where the bottom dropped out. That's where the public hangings took place, um, and the jail was there from 1812 until 1867. Um, it was it followed the principles of John Howard's reform, so rehabilitating prisoners, having better conditions for them, and things like that. That's not to say life wasn't rough, because it was a prison in the 19th century. Like a lot of prisons, it quickly became overcrowded and was closed in 1867. The prison then moved up on to the Plains of Abraham, and became, and that building is now part of le Musée des Beaux-Arts du Québec. And they still, it's also a neat place to visit if you haven't done so. So as I mentioned, closed in 1867. Following that, in 1868, Morrin College moved in. So along with the Literary and Historical Society of Quebec, the Literary and Historical Society of Quebec being the organization that operates the building today, the organization whose main purpose now is to run the Morrin Centre as a cultural center. Both the existence of both of those organizations, however, predates them moving into the building in 1868. Morrin College was founded in 1862 by Joseph Morrin, who, among other things, was the first elected mayor of Quebec City. It was the first English language institution of higher learning in Quebec City. Officially, it was non-denominational, but with a strong Protestant influence. The LHSQ, Literary and Historical Society of Quebec, was founded in 1824 by the Earl of Dalhousie as a learned society, obviously. And it bounced around in a few different places before making its home uh, in the Morrin College building. It's funny because the two entities almost moved in together in 1862, and it ended up being prevented by a fire. They were college was at the Masonic Temple here in Old Quebec, and the society was occupying the upper floors of a bank building, and it was struck by fire and destroyed many of the books, and sort of put the kibosh on them moving into the college. But eventually they were united on this common museum and library project, and they moved in together. This photo you see here was taken during the college era. You can see there's some differences, notably all of the prison era um, uh, accoutrements, if we want to call them that, have been removed. And you can see a bunch of folks standing around the door. We're looking at that, likely people attending the college and professors. This was a depiction of the inside of the building. You can see the facade is also depicted there. This was a meeting that would have taken place of the Association of Protestant Teachers. And here we see a photo, a class photo, would have been taken post 1885, because in 1885, women were admitted to the college. And it was the first institution of higher learning to admit in Quebec City to admit women. A full 40 years before Université Laval did it. So the college, as I mentioned, it opened in 1862, moved into the building that became known as the Morrin College building in 1868. And then it's important to note that the college did have an affiliation with McGill University for a number of years, eventually lost that affiliation in 1900, continued giving classes for another couple of years, and then it seems as if the classes, at least regular classes, ceased in 1902. And this photo would have been taken right around the time, probably around 1902, 1903. Just go to that. So it closed. But Morrin College as an institution continued to exist. As Patrick Donovan writes in the book, it was a foundation in everything but name. It supported various educational institutions and students to this day. It also supports other English language organizations in the city, including the Morrin Centre. So we're very grateful for what Morrin College does today. At one point, Morrin College actually wanted the building to be demolished and to construct a new school building, which would have housed the college, the LHSQ, as well as the high school that was affiliated with the college. At one point, the society was even given 2 months' notice to get all of its books out of the building. But the estimates for the construction of the building ended up being wildly inaccurate, and the final price tag was set to be about double what they initially thought. So that put an end to that. And the building is, luckily, we're still there to this day. It wouldn't be the only bullet that it dodges, but that would certainly one of the early ones. The library remained active in the building, and as I mentioned, is still in the building to this day. People have often called the library one of Quebec City's best hidden secrets. And while it's probably less true today, it was really true for a number of years, because there wasn't even a sign out front for decades to indicate that there was a library inside the building. Also, there was a common misconception that um, during the post college years that there was nothing happening in in the center. So, and I mean that was certainly true at some point, but there were a lot of different organizations that were in there and used the building for different purposes. As St. Andrew's Society, McGill had extension courses that were available there. Different talks by different organizations, including the LHSQ, of noteworthy and notable people who passing through Quebec City. Photographers used the dark room that was there and the science lab to develop photos. Different classes, guided tours were even started in the 70s, which probably not a lot of people know. And then the caretaker of the building actually lived there until the late 1980s. Um, the apartment, which was later converted into a kitchen during one of the restoration phases, and storage areas as well. Now things did slow down after the 1960s, and certainly from the 90s onward, there really wasn't much going on. Um, and you can see here um, this was sort of the outside of the building in the 70s. Looks very different. Parking meters, now it's all been redone, as you've seen from some of the photos, with a nice cobblestone street and no parking available in front. But one of the other interesting, this is a photo from the 1970s, the Imperial Order of the Daughters of the Empire actually used the building for meetings. So this is in the ballroom, which you'll see what it ended up looking like a little later on. So after this, there was a community vision that wanted to do something with the building. It stayed under the ownership and management of the college. And in 1952, they decided to put the building up for sale. Now, they didn't put up a for sale sign for about another 20 years. So I think it would be fair to say that they were passively trying to sell it, but really they were looking for the right kind of person, because they did feel, a sense of stewardship over the building and its history. Around 20 years later, in 1974, a real estate agent was hired. And again, like they were being pretty picky, and one of the members of the board of the college stated that the college felt a long-standing moral obligation toward the Literary and Historical Society. They were very concerned with the well-being of the society and the library after the sale. So they were choosy, and they set a high price. But as word of the attempt of a sale started to make the rounds, it did encourage a couple of very positive developments, things that help us very much to this day. And that's in 1981. There were two important things happened. The building was added to Quebec's Register of Cultural Properties, and later in the year, it was declared a National Historic Site by the federal government. So even though the sale didn't go through, it was it did spur on these developments. So in 1987, finally, there was a sale. Now, an important thing to note about the building is the college's properties at the time didn't just include the Morrin Centre. There was actually, behind the building, there was there still is a couple of buildings that are adjoined, and they're condos. Now, at one point, part of those were actually the women's prison, and another was the high school affiliated with the college. So those were also sold all at the same time. And then they were actually sold to a member of the Morrin College board, who 2 years later turned around and sold the Morrin College building to the city for a tiny little profit, and then was able to sell the condos later. So in this arrangement, he did also um, take great care over the Literary and Historical Society and the library. Um, so even though the valuable courtyard and parking spaces were lost, which something that smarts, especially nowadays when so many more people are traveling around by car. Um, the society was very happy because the gentleman who did the sale was able to arrange a rent-free agreement for the society with the city. Um, in the late 1980s, around the same time as the sale, the Voice of English-speaking Quebec began to push for the building to be restored, seeking out funding from the different levels of government. A few years later, John Keyes, who was a college history teacher here in the city, and in collaboration with VEC, formed the Morrin College Project, and that was, I guess, a formal effort to get funding for the restoration of the building, and they brought together the three levels of government for an exterior restoration, which cost about 2.3 million in the early 90s and was completed by 1994. The efforts continued after that. Jean-Paul Allier, who was the mayor at the time, announced that he would commit $1 million to turn the building into an English language cultural center, which would include the library. So he was saying that he would put these funds up in order to help attract funds from the federal government and the provincial government. And there was talk that the center should become a centre d'interprétation, which in many ways is what it's part of its mission and mandate today. In 1998, Mr. Keyes turned over the fundraising project to the Literary and Historical Society, and then in 1999, David Blair, who had been the president of the Voice of English Speaking Quebec, became the president of the LHSQ. And he was one of the driving forces in this restoration project. And he was president for 13 years and oversaw pretty much all of these efforts and put in a lot of hard work along with a lot of people. But he believed that the LHSQ, as the last tenant of the building, could be the one to find the necessary funds to bring the building back to life. An important note that in 1999, the annual budget for the Literary and Historical Society was $38,000. That's for everything, which is funny because it's essentially about half of what it costs nowadays to just maintain the building in terms of hydro and maintenance and insurance on the building and things like that. So things have changed greatly in 20 years. These efforts continued, and in 2003, the LHSQ signed an emphyteutic lease with the city of Quebec, a 99-year lease. And that, an emphyteutic lease, essentially makes an organization owner and everything but name. You're responsible for all of the upkeep and maintenance and everything. What it does, though, it allows the society to access different government funds and private funds as well, that as a strict renter of the building, it would not be able to do. And we also benefit from a lower property tax rate, which is still, a significant bill for us, but it would certainly be a lot worse if the city wasn't there to help with this. So I'm just going to go through some of the photos as I talk now. What you're seeing there is the library pre-restoration, and then everything had to be boxed up and moved out during the restoration, the first phase of the interior restoration, as I call it, that finished in 2006. Other than the library, lots of other improvements and additions were made. So fire safety and accessibility infrastructure, electrical, plumbing, and security systems. Secondary staircase was added. So the ballroom and some of the other rooms were also restored. So this was a library all boxed up. This is what it looked like under restoration, under construction, so to speak. This is, I guess, a little earlier than the previous photo when everything had been boxed up. We're looking at some of the work in progress. And this is, again, just a reminder of what it looked like before the restoration, and just to compare what the work that was done after the fact. And so you see, like, notably the chandelier that's there. Of course, it's a recreation based on some of the photos that we saw. Actually, the photo, the depiction of the Protestant Teachers Association, you can see the chandelier in that one. So that it was sort of modeled after that. But as I mentioned, when the library was all boxed up and it was moved over across the hall to St. Andrew's Kirk Hall, the church hall across the way, and it was there for a number of months before being able to move back into its location. So that was the only time that, since 1868, that the library of the LHSQ has been elsewhere. The other rooms, so the ballroom, College Hall, this is a photo of it from the 1970s. And some later photos. This is just pre-restoration. You can see the light fixture that's hanging from the ceiling there. Some of the work being done, you can see the thickness of the walls and like some of the piping that's being installed there. And then I think we're pretty proud of the end results, and then also of the fact that the room is, well, at least until about 12 months ago, was often filled with people for our own cultural activities, but also for rentals of the space for weddings or cocktails or Christmas parties and things like that, that we have been able to use it for those purposes to generate revenue outside of grants and donations. Just another shot, we use it for conferences and things now. So in addition to that, the lobby, President's Hall, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and a kitchen, I mentioned that as well, were installed, as well as new bathrooms and other things. So one of the reasons the project was broken up into two phases is because, like any good restoration project carried out by a nonprofit, funding was tricky and, of course, ran out at some point, and another round of fundraising had to be undertaken. Now, again, the three levels of government and private sources came through, and in the second phase of the restoration, the prison, the science and chemistry lab, were both restored to their appropriate eras. An elevator was installed, and offices were created in the third and fourth floor spaces of the building. Also during this time, there was the permanent exhibit in the prison called Doing Time, which was a history of prison life in Quebec City and a bit in the province of Quebec during that time. So this is a picture of the science lab from the 1970s, very grainy. Another one from a little later on. There aren't a lot of photos that exist of the space, and you can see today what it looks like. We've recreated the furniture in there and the lighting, and then at the back of the room you can still see the dark room, which is not functional anymore, but certainly certainly was for a long time. As I mentioned earlier, it was even used after the college era by local photographers. The prison, this is a little bonus shot. This is actually, I threw that in there because it's the basement, which people don't see on the tour, but just kind of a neat little look. And because during that down there, and then also in the prison, when the floorboards were removed, there were archaeological digs and lots of cool stuff, pipes and coins, and even a shoe were found during that time. So you can see, as I mentioned, for the prison, all the floorboards were removed. You can see what that looked like. The boards were removed, plywooded over. You can see on the left side, there was a lot of water had gotten in and rotted the board. So a lot of the boards had to be replaced, but we were able to save at least half of them. And you can see the clear demarcation of the new boards and the old boards. And this is the doing time exhibit that I mentioned earlier, with a lot of great objects on loan from other institutions, like a pillory and a cat o' nine tails and a ball and chain and one of the original prison registers. And it's filled with lots of great interested people on our tours. This was just to show the thickness of the walls, that were 4 feet thick in some places. So that made it quite challenging for a lot of the plumbing and electrical work that had to be done. And this is the other. So there were 2 cell blocks actually that remained from the prison era. One of which we sort of restored, painted the walls white as they would have been painted, the walls and ceilings white as they would have been done originally for the prison. And then the other we left as it was when the prison closed. This is a great photo because you can see also it's more muted, but you can see the demarcation of the old floorboards and the new. All of the furniture in there has been recreated, the table and the stove. And again, it's open to lots and lots of tourists and school groups. So I showed you the 4 main spaces that were brought back to life: the library, the ballroom, college hall, the jail cells, and the science lab. And so this was great. It was a phenomenal accomplishment for the society and for the city and for the English-speaking community. But you have a nicely restored building, and you have to do something with it. And I think that maybe some folks didn't quite realize, that once the fundraising for the building finished, that there needed to be more fundraising because we needed to fill the spaces with cultural programming. And it quickly became it was a realization that came pretty quickly to the group. I think that fundraising was going to be something that we always do, probably forever. As I'm sure many of you are involved with nonprofits, so you can all attest to this. But our cultural programming has evolved over time, and 5 or 6 years ago, we decided to break it up into 3 pillars: so heritage, education, and the arts, to build on the history of the Morrin College building, which was officially inaugurated as the Morrin Centre, to pay homage to that part of our past. So heritage, education, and the arts are these 3 pillars. So we try to every year develop programming and find funding to develop programming across these 3 pillars. One of our flagship events is the Imagination Writers Festival, which takes place every April. It will take place actually as of April 6th this year. I'll get a quick plug in for that. 6th through the 11th, a virtual festival this year, free No admission charge for that. So that's something to check out. Our education pillar has really taken off in recent years, and we offer literacy and STEAM, so science, technology, education, arts, and math programming every week, music, theater, and we have a really, really loyal, there are different programming for different age groups, and we have loyal fan base and all of those. Um, we certainly haven't forgotten the history and heritage aspect. In addition to the Doing Time exhibit, there's another permanent audiovisual hanging of William Poundon, which takes you through the final days of one of the more infamous um, murder cases and then hangings that took place during the life of the prison. We've done Laugh Lab, which is was a series of events and culminated in a temporary exhibit, which is actually still up on English language humor in the province of Quebec. Visions of Community was an audio-visual project that combined sort of stories, people talking, projections. It was just in the middle of our ballroom, hanging from our chandelier. It was this wild sort of paper display with projectors everywhere and sound clips of people talking about sort of what the community means to them. It was a nice mix of arts and heritage, I think, sort of storytelling and visual arts. Blossoms, Birds, and Beetles, which looked at some of the contributions of the members of the society, including the women connected to the society, and some of their naturalist exploits, street stories, one looking at the English language toponymy, which is a touchscreen project that was finished last year, just before the pandemic hit. So the absolute worst time to develop a touchscreen application. But we do hope to bring that back in the spring. And of course, our guided tours of all the spaces. So we have different themed tours for the spaces, including an outside tour called Our Writings, which is a literary walking tour around Old Quebec. And it talks about writers who spent time here or books that were written about Quebec City in English. And that's had we've had a lot of good feedback about that. So there've been a number of recognitions too that this project gave us, which always helps, I think, get us through, get your name out there and have people take note of what you've done. The restoration project itself won Mérite d'architecture de la Ville de Québec, le prix spécial du jury. So that was in 2011, right after the project, the restoration project wrapped up. The Ville de Québec, we also in 2013 received le prix du patrimoine. Association québécoise des interprètes du patrimoine in 2014. And then, of course, in 2018, QAHN's Richard Evans Award. And then following that in 2019, I would say all of these efforts finally bared the ultimate fruit. We caught our white whale and got recognized by the Ministère de la Culture et de Communication as a museum. And with it came operational funding, and in the same year, core funding from the Department of Canadian Heritage. And the fact that that great news came in 2019 couldn't have been better timing, because then the pandemic hit less than a year later. And it's that operational funding that allowed us to survive through this pandemic, as well as all the other support, of course, that has come out since. The goal behind all of this, if I could speak for all of the people before me, was to share the history and heritage with as many people as possible in a way that makes it also possible to preserve the building for future generations. So to really, it's the stewardship of the building, but also to make it a vibrant community place. And I think that we've done that. So in 2006, the year that the building was officially baptized, the Morrin Centre, we had 3,300 people come through the doors for the entirety of our activities. In 2019, which is the highest total to date, we saw 61,000, so a 20-fold increase. In that time, membership has increased by over 2.5 times. Self-generated revenue has gone from 18% to 40%. Our payroll expenses have tripled. So we now employ the equivalent of 10 full-time people with rotating part-time positions. And there, of course, are seasonal peaks in summertime when we have 5 or 6 guides hired per year to give guided tours. And, we're like all of us, and I know QAHN is one of these, attempting to pay better wages for the cultural sector. So I think, the numbers I just rattled off to you quickly are proof that there are plenty of economic and social benefits for public and private investments in buildings like the Morrin Centre and others. I know there are many others out there. We're just one example. There like a lot of and I know too that a lot of the projects that we undertake could be possible in another space, like the Writers Festival or some of the education activities, but would they carry the same weight? Would they have the same resonance? I don't think they would. And of course, there's a library and prison, which are sort of at the foundation of the different aspects of the activities that go on in the building, and those are irreplaceable. So you needed a vision, and you needed the people to make it happen. So there have been so many throughout the years who had this vision and stuck to it, including Morrin College, who went through painstaking efforts to find the right buyer for the building, and had that, as I mentioned earlier, that moral obligation to the society and to the library, and by extension to the English-speaking community. And David Blair and all the people right up through today who continue to do that are very active board of 15 members and our staff of 10 people. We're all working on a common cause. And I know some of the Fairbairn House in Wakefield is an example, I think, that follows what happened here. And neighbors of ours too, right across the way. If you can see it just to the right of the Morrin Centre, it's what is known today as the Maison de Littérature, which was a Wesleyan Methodist temple, which became the salon of the Institut Canadien, the organization that runs the city libraries. They're kind of like our French language counterpart in Quebec City. It's a library. There's tons of activities for youth, and of course they're mainly based in literature, based on their name. But it's kind of remarkable that we have these two institutions side by side. And again, they needed a lot of the same things that we did. Patience, support from the government and the private sector, and timing. Your timing has to be good. You have to have good luck. You have to be perseverant through all of this. And I feel like we're fortunate today, like all of us, and all of us here on this call who are clearly interested in heritage and heritage buildings. And we're benefiting from the hard work. Specifically in our case, it started in the 1980s. And if we look from the late 80s until 2011, when the restoration project was finally finished, we're looking at over 20 years from start, from start to finish on that. And then following that, it's been another 10 almost for us to get close to reaching our full potential, which I don't think we have yet. And the pandemic will certainly add another layer of complexity to that. We'll have new challenges coming out of that, as will all heritage spaces. So that wraps it up for me. I'll exit out of full screen mode, and I think we can open it up for questions if people have any.
Well, thank you very much, Barry. What an impressive story of a really amazing site, and congratulations on receiving recognition from the government of Quebec as a museum. That's really a feather in your cap for sure, and a well-deserved honor. I know that many years ago I walked past the Morrin Centre at night, and in the grand hall there was an exhibition of Irish fighting sticks going on, and I just imagine at the time the founders of Morrin College would be rolling in their Presbyterian graves about that. But it was a wonderful example of how the community uses the Morrin Centre, and how the center has become such a vital part of the community. So it's very interesting, and if you haven't been, I highly recommend it because it's a lovely site. So I see that people have started to turn on their videos, and so that's great. And if you have any questions, perhaps you could just raise your hand, or as I mentioned earlier, just use the raise hand feature. And let's see.
We got one here from Frank Mackey. Frank, why don't you
Okay, great.
turn on your mic and tell us what's on, what you want to ask.
I think I'm on. Is my mic on?
Yes,
all
go
good.
ahead, Frank.
Yes.
Yes, I just, I'm an old time member. I used to be a member of the Quebec Literary and Historical Society back in the 1970s. And it just, when you were talking, it brought back to me certain things. I remember Mr. Muse, who used to be the caretaker, a New Brunswicker, I think, too, like you.
Was he immune? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he was from New Brunswick, and he showed me around the building, and we went down to see the old jail cells and all that. And the librarians, I remember there was a Mrs. Landrio and a Mrs. Dooley who were working in the library. They are very nice. They were very disturbed because at the time I was working for the Canadian Press, and I wrote an article. I love the place. I love the library. I love the dusty old books and the smell of that sort of almost mildewed kind of books and stuff. And I wrote that in the story. I said, this musty library. They were very offended that I called it musty, But I meant to me, it was like a compliment. I just love that old style library, and it was just a great place to be. But are there people now who use the library as a library, like who borrow books and?
Oh, absolutely. During the pandemic, that's been one of the few services that we've still been offering. The library itself isn't open right now, but you can reserve your books online, or you can call up, and then a day or two later come pick them up, contactless pickup at the door. And we've expanded our ebook collection too. But the mustiness is still there, rest assured.
We still have old books.
We still have, up top we have our special collection, which is old books essentially, including Canadiana. It's mostly based around Canadiana, so that's the theme for the special collection. There are a few other books in there too.
I was particularly interested in British political history from the early 19th century. And there were all kinds of books there that were sort of the 3-volume correspondence of Lord John Russell or whatever, that sort of stuff.
Well, there's still a number of those there too. Mr. Muse, it's an interesting that you bring him up. I never met him, but I have met one of his sons who came back. And as I mentioned, the caretakers until 1989, I think it was, lived in the building, and Mr. Muse was the last caretaker to live there. And one of his sons came to visit me, just dropped in randomly, and about 3 or 4 years ago, and he brought a number of photos with him to show me of what the building looked like back in those days. as well as some artifact, including a gavel actually that Mr. Muse had made for this, and he came and he brought it back and gave it to us. So it was neat to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I give up the floor. I mean, I'm not going to take up.
The mustiness is still there, and when we have people walk in, they just say, "Oh, that smell! It hits you when you walk in the door." And I don't think anybody would take offense to that.
There's still the little statue of General Wolfe too. I think in the library, it's still there.
It is there, yeah.
Sandra, I think we had a question from Sandra there. Sandra, turn on your microphone.
Okay, Barry, I really enjoyed your presentation and seeing all the old visuals you had and everything. I'm quite familiar with the Morrin Centre. I've been in and out of it, especially since the restoration started. And I think I was one of, well, in a sense, lucky people who had a tour of the former prison area before there was any restoration done, just before it started. The directors and some other people from QAHN, we were given a little tour down there. One thing I wanted to mention on the subject of books, in 2010, there was one of Louise Penny's mystery series called Bury Your Dead. And the setting is the Morrin Centre. It's about a murder down the basement. And it's one of her better books, I thought so. That's it.
It's funny. I see Stephanie just joined us. She's our guided tours coordinator at the Morrin Centre, and so many people know us now because of that book. It's incredible, and they have people that we call them lovingly call them the penny people who come to the center, and they come and the book takes place in different places around Old Quebec, and there have even been walking tours developed that take you through the footsteps of the people on the tour, which is pretty cool. And she depicts it. It was a different time, but she does depict it as a bit of a musty old place too, but lovingly also, I think. Yeah.
I think it was an advantage for the Morrin Centre, and she did more or less catch the atmosphere. And having seen it and had a tour of the building before the restoration started, it's musty as being a kind description, but I found it endlessly fascinating. I always liked it very much. Okay.
Thanks, Sandra.
Pam Dillon has a question.
Well, I don't have a question, but if you can stand it, I just wanted to compliment you on, well, just all that's happened at the Morrin Centre. I've never been there. I feel ashamed. But the other day I was on a Zoom call and it was about projects and what impedes projects from getting off the ground. One of them was financial pressure. The other one was lack of community. And then the other one was lack of knowledge. And I just wrote those three things down as you were going through your presentation and thinking, check, check, and check. All three of those things, and probably the most important of those was that, well, two of them would be you don't lack community and you don't lack knowledge. And somehow the money has just come, not without hard work. So it's just absolutely remarkable because a project of that magnitude would just, you'd need to be firing on all pistons. And obviously you've done that. And as Heather said, your accreditation as a museum is just so fantastic, and hats off to you. And if I hear musty one more time, I may have to go get my asthma pump. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you for your comments. And yeah, as I said, it all goes back 150 years to Morrin College and how they cared for the building after the college closed. So we're lucky and that the building didn't just disappear. I've heard through well, people, let's say, and I believe this to be true, that there were different offers on the table. I mean, some of them are mentioned in the book, but that there were offers on the table from a prominent-ish family who owned businesses in Quebec City, to buy the building and maybe turn it into some kind of commercial affair. So we're also fortunate that didn't happen too.
I see Vicky's had her hand up for a while. Vicky, why don't you turn on your mic and ask
Yeah.
the question?
I think my mic's on. Do you understand me? Okay.
Yes.
So I just wanted to tell Barry that I remember going to the Quebec Celtic Festival like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, and there was a murder mystery event that night, and I participated in it, and there was a Scotch tasting, and it was absolutely amazing. One of the greatest memory I had in a long this time for the Quebec Celtic Festival. So, and I had a question for you. I was wondering if there were archives from the jail or college eras that still exist today, and if they are available for consultation.
There are archives. But we don't have any of those archives because they didn't belong to us. But the Literary and Historical Society's archives, we actually donated them to the Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales du Québec. So certain ones of those can be consulted there.
Okay.
Stephanie, so something else that's interesting too, on our website, the transactions of the Literary and Historical Society of Quebec are available to be consulted. So this is like documents that have been published, over the past almost 200 years. So I see Kathleen and Steph are both here. So maybe one of you could share the link in the comments.
And Stephanie had a question on Facebook, and I saw her joining here on Zoom. I don't know if you want to ask it, Stephanie, but she was asking how individuals and businesses can help the Morrin Centre out these days.
That's it. So Morrin.org is our website. I should have been better equipped to share some of these links. I can go in there and do that. See if it brings up a link. There are places to donate to the center. You can participate in our activities too. A lot of them are free or nominal charges. We have a couple of event series happening right now. And as I mentioned, our literary festival Imagination's coming up in the next about a little over a month's time. And so that I mentioned that's going to be free, but we'll certainly encourage people to donate if they like what they see during that. And fingers crossed, this summer you can come and take a tour of the building and get to see some of these exhibits that I mentioned earlier.
I see that Heather's having some issues with her cameras. Anyone else here have any questions or comments?
I just wanted to comment on a question from Vicky Onofrio there about the records, the jail records. The logs of the jail, the Quebec jail, are online at the Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales du Québec. You can actually look up the exact records, of the prison. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I should have thought of that. And as I mentioned, on site we do have that we borrow from the BANQ, the prison register. So we once a year swap that out and bring in a new one. So yeah, and the college, actually, I think the college is, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were also donated, their archives were donated to the BANQ as well. So you can consult those on site. I'm not sure about the permissions of consulting those. Kathleen's here, so she might know.
Yeah, they're also their archival phone are also held by the BNQ too. So they're
Just
I
in,
don't know about the permissions though.
yeah, that's what I'm not sure
Yeah.
about, but I know that they donated a lot of them, at least to the.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm wondering, Barry, if you can talk about, we talked about, the idea of buildings serving a community. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about Quebec's English-speaking community, maybe how it's changed. I know like in a lot of these little English-speaking pockets of the province, you have sort of like, there's very deep generations of families that are connected to a specific institution and care for it. Is that the case in the Morrin Centre? Or if not, how do you develop that sort of sense of appartenance, like for the building and the stewardship and all that? How does that work?
I think like, so the English speaking community in Quebec City, it's kind of like twofold. I think there are always lots of newcomers who arrive, associated with Laval or one of the video game companies that are hiring lots of people these days. But also, or even Valcartier, the military base too. But there are a number of historic Anglophone families that are still there. There was this statistic that the Voice of English Speaking Quebec published a few years ago, and I think I'm gonna try to get this right. It's something like this: 20% of the English-speaking population turns over every 5 years in the community. So there are a lot of people coming through who don't necessarily stick around. Trying to remember from the last census, I think after decades of decline in the percentage of English speakers in Quebec City, there was like a slight uptick, but like ever so slight, like 0.1% or something ridiculously low like that. So we sort of maintain at somewhere between 1.5% and 2% of the metro population of 800,000 people. So that's 12 to 16,000 people, let's say. So it's like a small city, but sort of spread out over a vast territory, I'd say.
And I noticed on Facebook a lot of people were saying, "Oh, I have such fond memories of the Morrin Centre when I lived in Quebec City, X number of years ago." So it seems like you are able, even though a lot of people, there's a turnover in the community, you're able to create that sense of that institution belongs to them somehow. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. And we like, one of the great things for bringing in new people has been our children's programming, actually. And we're bringing in families kind of for the first time, which had always been a harder market for us to tap into, and Francophone families. And just in terms of our membership, a survey we did a number of years ago, through that we estimated that maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 40-ish% of our members were probably Francophone at this point. So there has been that sort of reaching out to the Francophone community too.
Right. Rod, I see you have a question too. Why don't you turn on your mic?
Yeah, maybe this is an odd question, but do you guys have any relationship with the Athenaeum in Portsmouth, New Hampshire?
No.
Okay, I'll explain why I asked that. Portsmouth, of course, is a really interesting old town right on the coast with an important maritime history, coast of New Hampshire. And I was there about 10 years ago, and I walked into their Athenaeum, and that has a very similar kind of function, I think, to the city as the Morrin Centre does. But their library is the spitting image of the library in the Literary and Historical Society, part of the Morrin Centre. I mean, it has on 2 levels, and it has that intricate sort of woodwork on the balcony and the twisted staircases. And I kept thinking, and I think I mentioned it to somebody there, and they sort of said, yeah, that they'd heard of the Morrin Centre, or somebody they knew had been there. And I don't know whether there's anything sort of profitable, even culturally profitable, to make out of that. But I'd be curious to know, and I don't mean that you would know or that you'd expected to know, but just is there a architectural connection in terms of design, and is there any kind of anything to be made out of the common history? I'm just guessing it's a common history about how to serve a community. I would say very different communities, but both very old ones and with strong maritime histories. And I don't know, just something to look into. I can sort of imagine an interesting, I don't know, cross-cultural exhibit or something. Always good to reach across borders, even maybe especially now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The only time I'd ever now that you've kind of awoken my memory, and I think Patrick Donovan had told me about it at some point. But that's all I can remember. I can't I can't access any other memories of it. But I know he's at least aware of it. He's traveled extensively, as you know. But that's something for us to look into, certainly.
You were saying that the library moved in there in 1868. Is that?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's from around that time that the design would. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Barry, is the Morrin Centre still attached in any way to the Presbyterian Church down the street? I mean, you said that you left all the books in there in the church while it was under restoration, but was the connection very strong when it was a college? I mean, I probably it was, I suppose, but
it was, yeah. There were a lot of people who were or different people who were involved with both institutions during the time. Nowadays, not so much. I mean, other than being friendly neighbors and sharing resources at different times too, but no sort of official links. And I guess technically there never were official links, as I was saying, but like certainly always been a friendly relationship with them.
Glenn, are there any comments that have come through on Facebook at all or in other?
Lots of comments, mostly about just how much people enjoy the Morrin Centre and their fond memories of it, like I was saying. But yeah, really, it is a wonderful building. I encourage anyone visiting Quebec City to go check it out. They do great tours as well. Heather, I think that's about all we have for tonight. Anyone else here? Before we go, just wave your hand if you want to ask a question. I think we're good.
Okay, well, we'll bring it to a close, Barry, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for your presentation. It really is a wonderful center, and I know you've done a lot of work yourself in bringing it forward into the community and keeping it connected. So well done, and thank you for joining us tonight. And if you're interested, of course, we have some more talks coming up. The next one is on Thursday, March 11th. There's a bit of a break until the next one, and it's called Notable Women of the Pontiac with Tina Terrien. So it sounds like it's going to be a fascinating one. Tina herself is one of those notable women, and I'll tell you why when you come the next time. So that's Thursday, March 11th at 7 o'clock. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you for those of you on Facebook, and thank you for our Zoom attendees. Thank you, Glenn, as always. My computer just totally crashed there, so thank you for making sure everything was running. And so please check out our speakers lineup again on the website or on the Facebook page, Heritage Talks Online. And until next time, thank you very much, everyone, and good night.
And thank you, Heather, for doing a great job, and Glenn too, and thanks for the opportunity. And Stephanie and Kathleen are here, so they're part of everything that we do. So I just wanted to thank them. Sorry for jumping in at the end.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, have a great night, everyone.